Good afternoon. My name is Chara Jones, and I'm here to present my final project for EDUC436, which is focused on the use of literacy strategies within the secondary school. My content area is music education, and for my first lesson, I taught on the subject of music notation and rhythm. This class was taught to grade 7 students. So here are the literacy strategies that I utilized in this lesson. The first literacy strategy that I used was the graphic organizer strategy, and I used a tree diagram as well as a chart. And so a graphic organizer, or the tree diagram for the note symbols and the values is what I used, and then the second chart I used to show the notes and the rest values and the symbols as well. The content area of music can be a world of its own in terms of learning, and it certainly has its own language that students must be introduced to in order to read, to understand, and then interpret for the purpose of creating, writing, and then playing music. The graphic organizer strategy, I believe, is useful for displaying music note symbols that students will read in music no matter what style it is. They are able to learn what each note or rest symbol represents and also the numeric value of each symbol. The second strategy that I used was the mnemonic strategy, and that was through the use of flashcards that I created. This was used as a visual aid to reinforce the notes and the rest symbols that we just discussed in class, and also to help students to remember their numeric values. This strategy, I believe, is useful for reviewing content, especially recapping what was done in class, and then also you can use it in other lessons as a quick review. And it's also good to help students prepare for quizzes and for tests. And so I want to talk just briefly about some of the objectives for this lesson that were met. And first, I was able to introduce the notes and the rest and their numeric values. Second, I was also able to introduce the concept of rhythm using the same notes and rest that were discussed. Third, was able to help students identify the whole note, half note, the quarter note, the eighth note, and their rests. So students were able to look at the symbols and recognize what each symbol was, what each symbol represented, and how many beats each note or each rest had. And then lastly, the objective was met as far as reciting and clapping out combinations of rhythms by the reading of the notes and the rest that were taught in class. So just going back to the first literacy strategy that I used, the graphic organizer. They are structured overviews that can illustrate hierarchical and or linear relationships among the key concepts in a content, textbook, chapter, or unit. According to our textbook, a graphic organizer gives students a structure for incorporating new concepts with existing concepts, thus helping them anticipate the words and concepts in a content selection. So if we take a look at this tree diagram here that I used just to display and demonstrate what the notes and the rests are, the notes and the rests may be an unfamiliar concept to most students, but most students are able to do math by division. At this stage, by 7th grade, they would have been introduced to division, and there is a correlation between music and math. So if we look at the top note, which is a whole note, in order to get to the next layer branches out to 2 half notes, you would have to divide the whole note in half. And so as you go further down the tree, each note is then divided in half to get the note underneath. And so the whole note is divided to give you 2 half notes. The half notes are divided to give you 4 quarter notes. And then the 4 quarter notes are divided to give you 8 eighth notes. And so this diagram, or this tree diagram, was used to demonstrate that, but also to as a visual aid for students to see what the notes are, as well as what numeric value they have. And then as you can see in the right hand corner, you can see the rests that are the same value. You have the whole rest, which is equal to 4 beats, the half rest, which is equal to 2 beats, the quarter rest that is equal to 1 beat, and the eighth note that is equal to half of a beat. And so this tree diagram was used to demonstrate that. If we go on to the second chart that I used, it consists of 3 columns. So this was another visual aid that I thought was very useful for students that are visual learners. They're able to look at the note symbols that are necessary to know in order to read music and to understand music, and look at the rest symbols in the third column as well. And then the middle column simply gives you the name of the note or the rest as well as their numeric value. And so you're able to clearly see by looking at the chart how much a whole rest and a whole note is equal to, how much a half note and a half rest is equal to, how much a quarter note and a quarter rest is equal to, how much an eighth note and an eighth rest is equal to, and even a 16th note and a 16th rest. And so these 2 slides, these 2 charts are able to clearly communicate the notes and the rests and their values. And these are easy to refer to. If I was in a physical classroom, these are probably graphs that I would put on display that students coming in can always look at, just as a reference and a reminder to them. And so next, we talked a little bit about rhythm. It truly is the heartbeat of music. And so we were able to focus on that as well. And so if we continue on, I just want to talk briefly about one of the video activities that I was able to do with students. I'm not going to play the video, but here I just want to show you. It's an introduction to rhythm reading. And so if you look at the screen, you can see that this is a combination of notes. There are 3 quarter notes and 2 eighth notes. And so what we were able to do in class as the video played, we were able to count the rhythms as well as clap the rhythms as they came across the screen. And it was a really good visual aid, but also an auditory learning aid as well. And I think it was helpful to kinesthetic learners as well. If you think about the BARC model for learning strategies, this video was able to touch on at least 3 of those strategies, the visual, the auditory, as well as the kinesthetic. Students were able to use their hands and to clap the rhythms as they see them. They would clap 1 for a quarter note, they would clap twice, 1 and for the 2 eighth notes. And so looking at the video, each clip had a different combination of notes or rests that the students were able to clap out loud and to count out loud so that they could become more familiar with how rhythms work in different combinations of notes and rest values. So next, we just want to talk about the second strategy that I utilized in this lesson, and it's the mnemonic strategy, which is a memory-enhancing instructional strategy. It involves teaching students to relate new information to existing knowledge. In the classroom, teachers can use these steps to create mnemonics for vocabulary words. So A, they would identify the word. B, define the word. C, write the word on a file card. D, think of a keyword and write this on the card. And then E, draw a picture on the card to help memory. And so, like I said, the strategy that I used for the mnemonic strategy was flashcards that I created, and each flashcard simply had a note symbol or a rest symbol, and on the flip side of the card it had the type of note, whether it was a whole note or a whole rest or a half note or a quarter rest, as well as the numeric value. And so I did not utilize this strategy until the end of the lesson. I used it as a recap. And so after we had gotten through the lesson, I went to the flashcards and I was able to test students on their knowledge of what they had just learned. And it was very effective. Students were able to quickly identify the type of note that they saw on the flashcard as well as the numeric value. So another activity that we were able to do was being able to partner the students together and have them practice counting and clapping out rhythms. So one person would clap out the rhythm while the other person would count the rhythm. And that was very helpful, again, just in reiterating what they were learning. To be able to look at the notes on the visual charts or look at the rest was one thing, but to be able to clap them out and count them out adds another layer to their learning and their understanding of how those notes and rests work together to create rhythm in music. Secondly, I asked students to write out their own combination of note and rest, and to clap them out and count them out aloud in class. So I was able to end the lesson with just 3 recap questions. In addition to the flashcards, I was able to ask the students why note values are so important in music, and then also to share how they felt notes and rhythms work together to create music, and also to just recount or recall what are the notes and the rest that they learned in class and their values. So that was how I ended the lesson. And so some of my observations were that the students were easily able to identify the symbols for the notes and rests. Once we would have learned them on the charts, they were able to remember them when they saw them on the videos, and again when we used the flashcards. Using the video, the students were able to clap and count the rhythms, but also just in the lesson when I had asked them to have their own combinations or create their own combinations of notes and rest, they were able to count those and clap those out as well. There were some technical and internet challenges that affected the lesson time. Typically the lesson should have been between 20 to 25 minutes. However, because of those technical challenges with the videos that I was trying to play, as well as the internet was a bit faulty, the lesson ended up being 30 minutes. And finally, just some observations about the graphic organizers. The students were able to grasp the content very easily just by looking at it, and I explained, but I didn't have to do too much explaining for them to understand what the symbols were and what they meant. So, evaluation. My classmates were able to give me some feedback, and they really loved the introduction video. I used one of my favorite bands, Queen, their song We Will Rock You, which is very rhythmically driven, and I used it as an intro to see if I could get them to guess what today's lesson would be about. And they were able to guess very easily just by listening to the song. So it was an effective tool at the beginning of my lesson. Second, the graphic organizers, the charts, were helpful as far as them being able to identify the notes and the rest symbols and their values. Third, they were very, they loved the clapping and the counting, and it was effective as far as interactive learning, them being able to engage with one another and to count and to clap together. It helped them to really learn the concept of rhythm and the notes and their values and how they work together to make music. And lastly, the flashcards were good in reinforcing what they just learned in class. So that was some of the feedback. And of course, one more thing, one of my classmates gave me just a little hint of advice to make sure that I have the YouTube videos downloaded so that I could eliminate some of that time when I was trying to get the videos to play and they were taking a while to load, and some of that is the internet as well. But that's just a note for me for future classes. They also suggested to possibly have a plan B, like using the flashcards in place of the video if that happens again. And so just a note for me to make sure I always have a plan B, because technology can fail you. So let's move on to the second lesson that I taught, which is on dynamics in music. And so the first literacy strategy that I utilized was mind mapping, and I used a dynamics chart, a mind mapping chart. And the second literacy strategy that I used was a free writing or journaling. So here were some of the objectives that were met in that lesson. Students were able to look at written music as a result of the mind mapping chart, and they were able to recognize what the dynamic symbols were that we learned in class. Students were also able to listen to music and identify the different dynamics in a piece of music. And so the chart that I'm going to let you look at, it simply has the kinds of dynamics that are found in music, the basic ones that you first learn, and their symbols and their definitions. And so in that mind mapping strategy, you're able to clearly see that. So if you look at the diagram here, you see the main thought, which is the dynamics in music, in the middle, and the different branches. On the top, all of the branches on top speak to the dynamics that mean loud. These words are Italian, and so the dynamics are Italian, but we have the English definitions so that students can understand exactly what these dynamics mean. And so if you look to your left, you see forte, which the symbol for forte is F, and it simply means loud. So students would know that if they were to see that F symbol in a piece of music, wherever that F symbol is, that section of music should either be sung or played loud. Again, you have different degrees of loud demonstrated here. MF, mezzo forte, which means medium loud in English, or a little loud. And so if you see the MF symbol anywhere in a piece of music, students were made aware that they would have to sing or play that section of music at a medium loud level or a little loud. And next we have fortissimo on our right and fortissimo. And you see the symbols FF for fortissimo and triple F for fortissimo. And in English, they just mean very loud and very, very loud. So again, students were able to look at this mind mapping chart and see what the dynamic symbols are and also what they mean, what they translate to in English, so that as they look at music, they play it or they sing it, they're able to follow the dynamics to give the sound that the composer intended. At the bottom, you have the different degrees of soft dynamics. Piano, which means soft. You have that small P symbol. Mezzo piano, the small MP symbol. Very soft is pianissimo, the double P, and then pianissimo, which is the triple P, meaning very, very soft. And so students are able to look at this diagram and see the symbols for the Italian dynamics. They know what they are in English, and they're able to translate that to when they play or when they sing music and they see these dynamics written in the music. Second, my mapping chart's a lot simpler. This just speaks to the changes in dynamics. And so if you look at the chart, you see to the far left crescendo, which is an Italian word that means to gradually get louder. And if you look at the symbol for crescendo, it looks like a greater than or less than sign, where it starts small and you see the symbol gradually opening up, which demonstrates that the sound that's either played or sung should gradually get louder. And then you have the opposite of that, the decrescendo, where it looks like a greater than sign, that symbol, and it shows where it's open and it starts to grow smaller. And so that just signifies that the sound that is being played or sung should gradually get softer. And then we have the forzando, which means suddenly. So that sound is going to be a sudden burst of volume. There's not a gradual process. It's sudden. It's abrupt. And so that symbol is SFZ. So students are able to see these symbols in music, recognize what their meanings are, and then apply them as they sing or they play in music. And so this slide just shows, I'm not going to play the video, but this was another visual aid that I used in this lesson. It's just a short video, about 2 minutes long, that gives a little bit of history on dynamics and how they came about, as well as the symbols and the definitions that they would have learned in the mind mapping charts. So it just reinforces what was previously taught, and again, it is a good visual and auditory learning tool for students. And so we were able to watch that and just kind of reinforce the content that we just learned. So this lesson, students were able to ascertain that dynamics can be used to stir different kinds of emotions in the listener. And so listening to the opening video, I used another Queen song, We Are the Champions. Students were able to hear the change in dynamics between the verse and the chorus. And it was, one of my students said it evoked passion and excitement in her. And dynamics are the cause of that. Dynamics tends to do that. It gives life to the music in a way that nothing else really can. You have rhythm, but dynamics adds more to the music. And so there are quiet moments, there are loud moments, and moments that are exciting and passionate. Sometimes there are moments that in the music that can evoke sadness, even fear. And so dynamics can be used to stir different emotions. and evoke different emotions to the person that is listening. It's a very effective tool that plays on the emotions of persons listening to the music. So just a few observations from the lesson. The video on dynamics was informative, and it definitely reinforced the content that was learned on the 2 mind mapping charts. The song choices were good as far as helping to demonstrate how dynamics sound in actual music. Most times you tend to use classical music to give examples, but I wanted to use more modern songs so that students understood that dynamics are present in all kinds of music. It doesn't matter what style or genre. Dynamics are useful, they're used often, and they're very effective. The second song choice that I used was All By Myself by Celine Dion, and the students loved that song because they were very easily able to hear the contrast in dynamics from the verse to the chorus, to the second verse, to the chorus, and they were even able to identify specific dynamics. There's a moment in the song where there's a forzando, where she suddenly gets loud and the music suddenly builds, and it's a powerful moment. One of my students, that was the word they used, it was empowering. And so dynamics have that ability to do that. Next, the students were easily able to identify the dynamics. I think I shared that specifically with All By Myself, but with the Queen song, We Are the Champions, as well. There were, again, some technical challenges that affected the lesson time. Zoom actually stopped recording, and so I had to go back in and record the final few minutes of the lesson. There was great group participation and great group response to the content, so students were very engaged in this lesson and seemed to connect very much to dynamics and being able to identify dynamics in songs and share how they felt like the dynamics in the song added to the emotion of the song and how it made them feel by listening to it. So, evaluation. Just some helpful feedback from my classmates. They expressed that they loved the song choices and that they were very, very good as far as being able to hear the dynamics right off the top. So that was a plus for me. They did like the dynamics teaching video, but one of my classmates suggested that if I use the video, that I either lecture for a shorter period of time or just lecture without using the video for the sake of keeping within that 20 to 25 minute time frame. And so that was one thing I thought about. Do I need to use the video and the chart? I definitely wanted to have as much visual aids and auditory aids as possible. Again, just focusing on differentiate the learning styles. And so that was something I thought about. Perhaps next time I may only use one in another lesson, just depending on the time frame. They did enjoy the video intro, Queens, We Are the Champions, but one classmate suggested that maybe I could try another way to open the class to prevent overuse of video content. And lastly, they responded well to the journaling and free writing, their thoughts on the music and the dynamics. And so free writing and journaling, that was the second literacy strategy that I used, but I used it at the end of class to have students write and reflect on the music that they just listened to, and to communicate firstly what feelings what feelings came from listening to the songs, and how do they think dynamics played a part in it, and to also identify what the dynamics were in the song. And so that was what the free journaling, the free writing journaling exercise was about. I assigned that for our homework, but they were also able to share some of that in the class session. So if we look at this slide, these were just the recap questions that I asked to end the class. I asked them to share what the dynamics were that we learned today. Also to talk about why they think dynamics are important in music. And of course, like I said, they were to write their response to the songs that we listened to in class. We didn't get a chance to listen to I Will Always Love You, but that was assigned for homework for them to listen to the Whitney Houston version of that song, and to write about the changes in dynamics that they heard, if there were any crescendos or decrescendos or even forzandos, and what emotions did the dynamics help to convey in the music, and if there was any connection there for them. And so just to conclude, share my thoughts about literacy strategies. I believe that music education can greatly benefit from the use of literacy strategies when teaching, no matter the grade. It is a little bit harder because music tends to be a world all in its own, to use a lot of the literacy strategies, but I think we as music educators have to try to tweak and adapt the strategies to best fit the content that we're trying to teach, because we have these students that have these struggles with reading and writing and comprehension, and we want them to thrive. We want them to grasp the content. And so being able to differentiate the lesson plans and not teach things the same way to appeal to the auditory learner, to appeal to the visual learner, and the reading and the writing learner, and the kinesthetic learner is important. Music education, that's huge. You have the kinesthetic learning where you are singing, which engages your entire body, and you're playing instruments, which engages your hands, and in some cases your mouth. The reading and the writing, students must be able to read music and be able to write the music. The visual components, they have to be able to recognize the music notes and the symbols and the rests and the staff and the measures and the clefs, and also just as far as learning, using visual aids that will help them to retain the content is important. And of course, the auditory aspect, being able to hear music is very important. Being able to demonstrate a lot of the musical terms is necessary. It has to be heard. You can only communicate with words to a certain extent. The music has to be heard in order for students to fully grasp and understand what it is that you're trying to teach them musically. I also believe that it's important to tier the music content through assignments and group work, and to accommodate students that are at different learning, different levels. Not every student is going to be at the same level, and there may be other challenges that affect that, their ability to learn. And so I think as music educators, we have to be sensitive to that and not ignore that, and be a little bit more intentional about tiering our lessons to accommodate that. And lastly, just I think that it is extremely important to continue to explore the literacy strategies that are out there, and to adapt when necessary in order to bridge the learning gaps that are found across all content areas. Because again, the same students that struggle in other classes are going to struggle in your class if you are not intentional about that. I just want to say that I am grateful to have taken this course as a music educator. I've learned a whole lot about literacy strategies, and I'm hoping to utilize everything that I've learned to help me not only be a better teacher, but to help my students of all different learning styles and at all different levels to grasp content and to truly comprehend and make application. So thank you, Dr. Swan, for this semester, and thank you for being very intentional about helping us to learn the importance of literacy strategies. The end.